All right, well, good morning. Welcome here, friends. Welcome, welcome. If you are new with us, my name is Paul, and I have the honor of serving here as the lead pastor. And as Brandon shared, it was Curtis's birthday last Sunday. And it's kind of cool when things like that line up, and his birthday's on a Sunday because we get to talk about him a little bit. We don't talk about everybody. I know, I'm sorry. So if it's your birthday last Sunday or this Sunday, happy birthday to you. But I did hear that Curtis did not get hugs, nor did he get a tussle of the hair, which he loves. So today is an opportunity, if you missed it last Sunday, to give him a bit of a tussle of the hair, give him a good hug, and wish him a happy birthday. But today is actually somebody's birthday who's, I think, is the best person in the world. You're all really wonderful and nice and good and in your ways, and I know some of you, which is wonderful. But it's my wife's birthday. So Jessica, happy birthday. Yeah. I love you very much. Yeah. All right. Okay, let's get back to business. Today we are wrapping up our Follow Me Beyond the Cross series. We have been looking at moments in the life of Jesus where he invites people to follow him. And often, not just ordinary people, but unexpected people. In the middle of their ordinary lives, with their ordinary work and their ordinary giftings, Jesus comes along and invites them to follow him, to trust him with who they are, and to follow him well. And what we have been seeing is that invitation still extends to us. This is an invitation after the cross, after the resurrection, to follow Jesus. Now, as I was thinking about today's message, I remembered that in one of my counseling classes years back, our instructor had us do a project that at first, if I'm honest, felt kind of weird. She invited us all to write down our own eulogy. Basically, she asked us to imagine we were dead, which is not a great way to start a class, but she did. And then she said, yeah, write out your eulogy and write down things that you think people will say about you. What will your story look like? Now, this sounds a little bit morbid. It's a little bit weird. If I remember, the page actually had like a tombstone on it. We had to write our name. It felt really weird. But as strange and as weird as that felt, it actually became one of the most interesting and contemplative things I had done in my life to that point. Because it really forced me to reverse engineer my life, to really think about who I am and what would actually be true at the end of my life. And this kind of thinking, this kind of processing, this kind of contemplating to look at that dash in between the years, what does that hold? What's all in it? Forced me to ask a few questions of myself. Now, the first question was, what kind of life am I actually living right now? What kind of life am I actually living right now? And maybe that's a good question for you to ask yourself. What kind of life are you actually living right now? And as I pondered that, as I got away from screens and people and just sat down and began just to really think about it with a pen and paper and began to jot some ideas, the thing that kept rising up beneath that is that, who am I actually becoming? And both of them are really connected, right? What kind of life am I actually living leads to the person I'm becoming. And it had me ruminating and thinking about this for a long time. I mean, I think we all carry some picture of who we hope to be, right? The kind of person we want to become, the kind of life we imagined we would have or hope to have. But is the life we're living right now actually forming that kind of person? And as I sat with these questions long enough, something really became clear. The life I wanted to be remembered for was really not the things that I imagined about when I was younger, not all the things that I hoped for and dreamed about. You know, it wasn't about becoming famous. You know, when you're little, you're kind of like, I want to be, I don't know, astronaut. I think it was cosmonaut for me back then, but anyways. Some of you get it. All right. It wasn't about being famous. It wasn't about being popular. You know, it wasn't about like writing a great book one day or making a team or getting the right job. It wasn't even about being influential. Like no one day will stand at the funeral and say, man, Paul had a lot of followers on Facebook. And he had that great viral post about the Oilers and the Ducks. No one will. No one cares. No one cares about that. No, the more honest I was with myself, the more I thought about it, what I really deeply in my heart wanted at my eulogy, at my funeral, was to be remembered for a life that loved well. I remember writing that down. I wanted to be remembered to have a life that loved well. So I started thinking, what does that mean? What do I mean by a life loved well? And I started imagining people in my own life that I think love well. I started picturing them. There were some people that were like heroes, people I read about, whether it was like Eugene Peterson, this writer and author and pastor. And there was people that I knew deeply, like my wife, my parents, my grandparents, some of my relatives and friends. And I started imagining their lives. And I said, yeah, these are the people that love well. Now, of course, the people I imagined and who I thought they loved well, I started thinking, why do I think they love well, right? Like there's always these questions behind the question, and there's always wrestling that happens when you're all starting out of writing your eulogy, was like, why do I think they love well? What is it about them that makes me think that they love well? And as I thought about a lot, the one thing that kept coming up is that they all had something in common. Every single person that I imagined and thought about that loved well had this one thing that this one connection, this one thing that marked all of them. And that thing was sacrifice. Sacrifice. In every example that I could think of a life that I thought loved well, there was some kind of sacrifice. Some kind of sacrifice. And the thing is, it's not just like a nice thing to say, like we're in church, so we're going to talk about sacrifice, Jesus' cross, all that kind of stuff. No, it seemed like every person that I thought lived a life that loved well had a life of sacrifice. And the thing is, it's actually seems to be embedded in the DNA of all of life, in the universe. Like every story, every hero story that we read about, watch a movie about, read a comic book about, go to a show, or see with our own eyes, every hero's story has a moment of sacrifice. Every great story has a story of sacrifice. And that's exactly where Jesus takes us in our conversation today. Now, in just a moment, we're going to look at the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 8. Now, what's interesting about Mark is as he's writing the story of Jesus, it's Peter who's actually telling him about the story. So Mark is listening to Peter and he's writing this down. So that's a little clue to hold on to for now. And as we look at this specific conversation that Jesus has with his followers, before we really jump in, just a little bit of a context of the bigger picture, just so you kind of understand where our story finds ourselves. Now, at this point, at chapter 8, Jesus, by this chapter, is growing in stature. What I mean by that is his influence is growing. He is known. More and more people are noticing him. More and more people are talking about him. He's gone viral. He's on the news. People want to know about him. Instagram stories are just filled with Jesus stuff. So people just keep showing up. They want to see what he's going to do next. There's just so much curiosity and excitement around him. So crowds are beginning to form and follow him wherever he goes. And on the surface, that looks incredible because this is a great momentum, right? Like he's like, the kingdom of God is here. The kingdom of heaven is here, and there's all this momentum that's gathering around him. Excitement, curiosity, lots of hope, and lots of expectations. And it's worth mentioning that in this chapter 8, right before even our story, just in this chapter alone, before our story, Jesus has already miraculously fed 4,000 people. He has insulted the Pharisees, the religious class of that time. He has insulted King Herod, and he healed the blind man. Like, it's a pretty packed chapter. There's a lot of stuff that already has happened. So you can imagine people are starting to form a lot of opinions, expectations, and ideas around who Jesus is. There's a lot of buzz about him. And right in the middle of all that, Jesus turns to his disciples, his inner circle of followers, the ones who have seen all the things he's doing. They've seen it all up close. And he asks them this question. And we read, Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, "Who do people say I am? Who do people say I am?" Now, that's a pretty big question, right? But this question actually, at this point, leaves the disciples a little bit off the hook. There's no pressure on them. He's asking them, what do others say about me? So they can hey, if somebody gets it wrong, that's their fault. It's not ours. So they have an opportunity to really be honest with him. So they reply to him. They say, they replied, some say John the Baptist. Some say Elijah. And others say you are one of the other prophets. Which is a really super fascinating answer. At this point, Some people are saying that Jesus might be John the Baptist. Now, I don't know if you really pause on this part of the Bible. If you're a Bible reader, if you're not, that's okay. You're going to hear about this today. But like John, at this point in the story, John the Baptist has been beheaded. Like John's dead. And yet, and people know this, and yet some are wondering if he's somehow come back in the person of Jesus. Now think about that for a second. What would someone have to be doing for people to look at them and say, I think he's already come back from the dead? Whether it's John the Baptist or Elijah or one of the prophets, whatever Jesus is doing is so compelling, so powerful, that people don't have categories for it. That they look at him, they see the things he's saying, they see the things he's doing, and they say, he must be back from the dead. Then he asked them, but who do you say I am? Now this is a much harder question, right? Because they can't hide behind other people and what other people think. They have to actually answer it. Now, how would you answer this question? Now, just think about it. You don't have to yell it out. Just think in your mind. How would you answer this question? Jesus looks at you and asks you, who do you say I am? What does your life reflect to say who I am? Who do you say I am? Now, maybe let's take it a little bit. Let's make it a little easier. Let's say it's not Jesus asking you. Let's say it's your friend, a coworker, a neighbor, and they're like, hey, you've been going to church? You've been going to like the Lakeview church? Who's Jesus? What would you say? What would you say? Jesus asked him, but who do you say I am? And we read, Peter replied, you are the Messiah. I love this about Peter. He's like my favorite Bible character. There's a lot of them because you can see yourself in a whole bunch of different people in the Bible, but I love Peter because he's just so human. He gets it right sometimes, he gets it wrong the other time. He's all over the place, and God's like, still keeps trusting him. So I love that about him. But Peter's been with Jesus, and he's seen enough. He's quick, impulsive. He's ready to answer. He's like, you are the Messiah. Now, the Messiah in Greek is the word Christos. Christos. This is where we get the word Christ, which means anointed one. Christ, anointed one. It's not Jesus' last name. Like, it's Jesus Christ. Christ is not his last name. It's actually a title, and it means, Christos means anointed one. Now, the Hebrew version of this word is Mashiach. It has that awesome, I can't even do it right, Mashiach. Like, you got to have that thing in your throat. And that's actually the word, that's actually where we get the word Messiah. You can see it, right? Mashiach, Messiah. That's the word, Messiah. And both literally mean anointed one. Sometimes the Bible will kind of throw a curveball, and they'll say the Son of Man, which also means anointed one. But these are like the big titles that we know. Messiah, Christ, Anointed One, Son of Man. They all kind of mean the same things. So when Peter announces this and pronounces this to Jesus, when he says Messiah or Christ, he's really naming the Anointed One, the King. The Anointed One in the Old Testament was somebody who would be anointed with oil to say, you're going to be our King. Peter recognizes this. He says, you are the King. You are the Anointed One. Now, for Jewish people, this is really significant because they've been waiting generation after generation for God to send the one, the anointed one, he had promised in the scriptures. They're waiting for Messiah, the king, the royal figure who would come and set up God's kingdom here on earth and to make things right, to restore and to rule the world. So when Jesus shows up, teaching with authority, healing people, drawing crowds, it starts to come together for people. Maybe he's Elijah, maybe he's John the Baptist. Like something compelling is happening. And Peter in this moment steps forward and says, I know who you are. I've seen enough. You are the anointed one. You are the one we have been waiting for. But Jesus warned them. It's the next verse. It's so wild. But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. It's like Jesus acknowledges Peter. He's like, yeah, you got it right, man. That's right. No, but now, shh. Don't tell anyone. Which is super confusing, because if you're proclaiming a new kingdom, if you are the king who has come to overthrow the powers that be, you don't hide that. You tell everyone. You get everybody ready. You prepare them for battle. The king is here. Guys, I'm here. Start arming yourself. I'm going to lead you to victory. But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. And then we read, then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man, the Anointed One, must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of the religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later, he would rise from the dead. So everything up to this point in Mark 8 is going perfect. There's momentum, there's buying, there's crowds, there's fervor, there's mob mentality. The temperature is perfect for revolution. But then Jesus does something that goes against the grain. He introduces a way that doesn't line up with with what anyone expects. It doesn't fit the way the world works. A rejected king? A king who will suffer? Like, that's not a winning combination. So then no wonder we read, as Jesus talked about this openly with his disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Peter, who just said, "You are the Messiah. You are the anointed one." This same guy takes Jesus to the side and rebukes him. It's kind of hard to believe. Peter's like, "Jesus, you are the anointed one. But let me explain to you how that works." Right? Haven't we done that too? "Jesus, I love you. I follow you. But why aren't you doing the things I want in my life?" Peter rebukes him. He pulls Jesus out of earshot of the other disciples. And he's like, "What are you talking about? Things are going great. Look at the crowds. Everywhere we go, people are showing up. You are known. This is working. What are you talking about, arrested and killed? That makes no sense. Jesus, I have seen you calm the storms with your voice. I have seen you fill my nets with fish. What are you talking about, suffering and getting arrested and killed?" Peter cannot believe what he's hearing. And then we read, Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, then reprimanded Peter. "Get away from me, Satan," he said. "You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Oh. I think this all goes back to the question Jesus asked them, "Who do you say I am?" Because Peter got the title right, Messiah, Mashiach, you're Messiah, you're the anointed one. But he completely got the wrong vision for what that meant. So Jesus rebukes him. "Get away from me." Actually, the more literal, better translation is, "Get behind me. Get behind me." Peter, you don't get to lead the direction here. You get to follow. Peter, what you're desiring, that's the pattern of the kingdoms of this world. Grasping for power, taking control, justifying murder, taking the sword, sending a drone. That's the way of Satan. That should make us pause. Peter's desire to fight the good fight, to use the means of the world, power, control, coercion, sword, for the good fight, is the way of Satan. It's the same voice that's been deceiving humanity since the beginning. Did God really say that? Surely you will not die. It's the same voice that spoke to Jesus in the desert. Turn these rocks into bread. Why are you starving? Look at all the governments out there. Just bow to me and all this will be yours. Jesus calls out Peter, "Get behind me." He's basically saying, Peter, let's just be honest here. You have enjoyed being called my disciple. You've enjoyed being in the inner circle. You've had the front row seats to some of the great miracles and things that I've taught and done. You've seen it all up close. It's been good, right? But you're enjoying all the benefits without facing any cost. You know what that is? It's self-serving. Then calling the crowd to join his disciples, he, that's Jesus, said, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. You must give up your own way, your self-serving instincts, your need to be in control, to be right, to be in charge, and take up the cross. Now, this isn't just a metaphor. We know that, right? Because where the story is going, it's going to take Jesus to an actual cross. And as clueless as Peter can seem in these moments, I don't think he's actually completely missing it. I think he feels the weight of what Jesus is saying. That's why he pulls him aside. That's why he pushes back and rebukes him, because he realizes if this is where Jesus is going, then following him means he has to go there too. Now, Peter isn't afraid of suffering, I don't think. It's not, at least not the kind of suffering he's expecting. He's ready for a fight. He's ready for a revolution. He's ready to suffer if it leads to victory. He's ready for the Messiah who conquers. He's not afraid to take up the sword. But what he's not ready for is a Messiah who doesn't fight Rome, who is killed by Rome. A Messiah who doesn't take up the sword, but takes up a cross. Now that's really different. And there's a turning point here in this moment in the scriptures. Because Jesus isn't offering himself as a means to your ends. He's inviting you into his kingdom, his story, his way of being human. And that means we don't just receive from him, we give our whole selves to him. The same way he gives himself for us. That's a very different kind of following. Now, one of my favorite authors and theologians, Henry Nouwen, had this incredible ministry and wrote beautifully about following Jesus. Some of his books have transformed my life, the way I think, the way I live. But his ministry first started in the way that most people would call a dream job in academia. He was teaching in places like Notre Dame, Yale, and Harvard, writing books, speaking all over. He's respected, influential, growing in popularity. But over time, something didn't sit with him. He began to sense that the life he was building wasn't the life Jesus was inviting him into. So he made a decision. He made a decision that really didn't make much sense because he decided to leave it all. He left the platform, the recognition, the influence. And people around him didn't understand it. They were angry. They were like his friends and colleagues. They all tried to talk him out of it. Why would you leave all of this? You're throwing your career away. But Nouwen was convinced. Nouwen was convinced that Jesus was inviting him to something different. So he left. He moved into a small, L'Arche community and lived alongside people with intellectual disabilities. And it was there that he began to see something he just couldn't see clearly before. He began to see the image of God in people. He began to see the image of God in people the world so often overlooks. It was there that he encountered Jesus in a way that platforms and positions and influence and power and all those things just could never give him. Nouwen would later reflect on that season as a place where he began to truly understand the way of Jesus. And he wrote, we're not called to be relevant, but to be faithful. To be faithful in how we follow. Now, when we hear stories like that, I bet your mind goes where my mind goes. Like, do I have to give up everything? What does that mean, Paul? Like, do I have to give up everything, sell everything? Well, like, what does it mean for me? What do I need to do to be faithful to follow Jesus? Does that mean I have to give up everything too? And the honest answer is, I don't know. I don't know what Jesus will ask of you. I don't know where following him will lead in your life. But I do know this. He's inviting you into a life with him. A story shaped by his kingdom, where your life becomes part of what God is doing in the world, and he's inviting you to follow him there faithfully. Now, there will be moments, forks in the road, crossroads, points of tension, where what Jesus wants for you and what you want for you it won't line up. And in those moments, you'll have to decide, am I going to follow him or just choose what works for me? See, the temptation Peter was experiencing is one we all experience. It's the temptation to be relevant, successful, powerful, and to fight the good fight, but to take control. After all, that's just how the world works. Jesus understands all this. He's God. He's not naive to this. And so he looks at the crowd and he says, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Another way to understand this, friends, is this. The life you're trying to save, you're going to lose. You'll lose it anyways. Life is vapor. It doesn't last. All of us will have real eulogies said about us at some point. So Jesus says, what if you didn't lose it? What if you didn't just lose it? What if you chose to give it away on purpose for something that actually matters? What if you loved well? And Jesus defines the love, doesn't he? Love defined by Jesus is a form of self-sacrificing. And all self-sacrificing is painful, all of it. Therefore, friends, the primary way we become more loving is opening our heart to more pain. Following Jesus is loving well, which means there will be sacrifice. Jesus is very honest here. He's very clear. It's not like fine print, you like get a gadget and you think you get all the things, and the fine print is like, actually, Jesus is very clear. Following him will cost you the life you're trying to hold on to. It will cost you the life you want to control, the life you want to secure, to consume. But in losing that life, you don't lose yourself. You actually find your true self. You step into the life of the kingdom, a life shaped not by grasping, but by self-giving love. Friends, in our time of people, all of us searching for identity, meaning, who we are in this world, all this identity conversation all the time, Jesus says, when you lose that life, you gain your true self. That kind of life that looks like Jesus. Not an easier life. No. But a life that is caught up in what God is doing. A life that stretches even into eternity. And we know this is true because Jesus didn't just teach it. He lived it. He walked the path of suffering. He went to the cross, and what looked like loss, like failure, like defeat, through that very death, he defeated death itself.